the inspiration of Make Kids Transform. First year in high school, you asked me to get involved with mindfulness. Why was that?
Making this present in the public school system will make everyone more productive.
Agni Zotis here with the Educators Edition and Make Kids Transform. Today, we're thrilled to have Francis Serrano. That is actually my son and the co-creator of Make Kids Transform. And a little of my North Star on a very personal note on youth programming, goodness, and really inspiration for a great future. Francis, welcome. Can you please tell us about you and who you are? And we'll start from what you do now.
Yeah. Thank you for the introduction and kind words. A little bit about myself. I was born and raised in New York City. Always had a passion for environmental sciences and marine biology. Ended up doing my undergrad in general biology with a focus in environmental. And now, after doing my master's at the University of Miami for marine biology, particularly fisheries management, now I'm working with NOAA, a cooperative institute for the National Oceanic Atmospheric Association. I'm part of a team there, a lab and research, sometimes educating interns, exposing them to laboratory experiences and methods, and hopefully inspiring the next generation of scientists.
That's amazing. And what does a marine biologist actually do? Can you please tell us?
Yeah, I think it's honestly one of the broadest fields of biology, because a lot of the other fields, technically a lot of the people I work with, including myself, are microbiologists. We work with DNA, we work with chemistry or like biochemistry protocols in the lab. It's a lot of molecular work, but a lot of people I work with are also in the field a lot. A lot of people I work with have specialties associated to big picture research versus very niche things. So like, saving the corals versus studying a very specific bacteria that might be related to coral disease. Or when it comes to our work, we work with environmental DNA. So we're monitoring a variety of species in the water, and it can be anything from like detecting presence or absence of invasive species that might help with management, or trying to better understand fisheries migrations or stocks over longer periods of time, over larger spaces. So the cool thing about marine biology is that it encompasses so much, especially where I work. There's a huge variety just on the floor and across the different labs.
Where are you located?
My master's degree was at the Rosenstiel School with the University of Miami on Virginia Key, and then my internship, and now I'm employed with SASe, which is a cooperative institute for marine and atmospheric sciences, working in the NOAA laboratory.
Are you involved with education?
Yes, I am totally involved in education every summer, whether it's training new hires, whether it's helping new people, learn the ropes or feel confident around the lab, whether it's having my own interns. There's always educational aspects to my job. And for this summer, I had an intern through a program that one of my PIs started called the CMS MDC program, CMS being that cooperative institute that we work for, and MDC being the Miami-Dade College. So that was to give exposure to laboratory experiences and research from community college background or underrepresented background. And that was an awesome experience where we took a project we designed together to completion in 10 weeks. And that was one-on-one time, about 20 hours a week with my intern. And then last summer, I was part of the Frost Impact program. So that's University of Miami collaborating with the Frost Museum of Science. And we were getting kids from high school. This is the goal of that program was to expose underrepresented backgrounds to laboratory experiences or STEM experiences. And I recently checked in with the two high schoolers that I mentored last summer, and they are both scientists now. So that's awesome. One is a biologist and one is on his way to becoming an engineer.
Congratulations. You're inspiring young people.
Yeah, that was awesome. At the time, one of them thought he was going to be a or one of them was aspiring to be a minister of a church, and one was just working at a Chipotle and didn't really know what to do. But I think after that summer experience, they were both extremely excited, and I think I helped inspire and foster their minds to think outside the box and think of a future for themselves they hadn't previously. So that was a special kind of educational experience, I think. I love working with high schoolers.
Well, that's a good educator right there when you could inspire and open up minds, right?
Yeah.
That's the definition, basically.
Yeah, I'd like to think so.
It is so. I mean, if we see our experiences of the way we experience education, that's what it comes down to. And the way I see educators, and in this, for the sake of this podcast series for the educators, is that they're like superheroes, and that they could either inspire people, or they could also be villains and really destroy dreams. And
I've had both experiences.
Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Yeah, of course. I think that's quite a duality in education. I think both are important. I think that, before I get into any stories or specifics, I think it's just important to realize that obviously, like, the positive experience are very positive and inspiring and productive in a lot of similar ways. The terrible experiences are the professors that some of them like pushed me and I didn't like that, but that was good, right? But then there's also just like bad experiences. Like I felt like they were like literally like personally had an issue with me on some level. In its own way, that was productive as well for me learning how to manage interacting with superiors or power dynamics, or like learning what not to do and what not to take. And it wasn't always directed at me. Like sometimes I just like in a room with, like a doctor and a peer, and the way they spoke to the I've seen all kinds of scenarios, and I think those are just as enlightening as the positive ones. And sometimes those negative experiences push you to want to make a change, and inspire you to want to be better. So both have been important. I started experiencing things like that, and or at least as I can viscerally remember, as early as elementary school. I had an awesome teacher named Themi. I still remember how he taught his class and like introduced us to math through games and puzzles, Sudoku, and he just made learning fun. And it was like the first time in elementary school where like learning felt fun and less of a chore. And it was all his perspective. It was all his take on it. And that similar things carried in through middle school. I think middle school is a lot more socially oriented, like learning the ropes that becoming, that transition from elementary to high school. And then high school is definitely a solid mix of the two. And I even feel like in high school, I had some of both from a given teacher. There was a couple teachers that I felt like had it out for me, but then towards the end of the semester, like felt like rounded a corner, and they really just wanted me to succeed, but they weren't doing a good job at expressing it, or they were also just frustrated with the rest of the class and high school is a lot of fun. High school is also challenging. But I think these experiences help shape you, right? And give you what's the right word? Give you like a feeling that you're left with, like, when you're faced with that question at the end of high school or, junior year. I'd always been working up thanks to my parents, who always fostered my passions and curiosities, especially academically, and pushed me to be better academically, and like not necessarily listen to the superficial stuff or the grade you might get on a single test. Like I really appreciate that, because I think that some of those experiences in high school really turned some of my peers off from applying to colleges, or applying to colleges that are considered better than others, or applying for scholarships or any of those things. Especially growing up in New York City, I think there's a lot of opportunity for business, for money. Like school isn't necessarily, although it is societally the status quo. I feel like for my class, it wasn't necessarily for my not just my circle. For my circle, we almost all went to college. Even some of my friends who didn't, like we all went, but it was also pushed, or not pushed. It was encouraged by our principal also. So I think we had a little different. But those negative and positive experiences as extremes from educators really affected me in college. And I'm thinking about right now, like a really positive mentor and professor I had who has written me my letter of recommendation for my first job out of college, for my master's program, for the job I'm in now. He is an amazing scientist. He's an older man. And his focus was very much on exposure, on inspiration. Like he taught a conservation biology class, which I took with a grain of salt. I think conservation biology is something that's extremely important. And I aspire to feel like I'm conserving the natural beauty of the world. But I think that field is some of the hardest stuff to actually get done and could tend to be the most frustrating. And even that goes back into preconceptions I had from my high school teacher from AP Environmental Science, kind of teaching like a doomsday environmental course, which was regular, I think, in the public education system. I think that might even be how she was taught 10, 20 years ago or whenever it was. But he was very optimistic. He not necessarily like, you guys can save the world, but just pointing at literature of innovations, technology, new cutting edge methods that are being integrated into conservation and environmental science, and taking us into the field and actively using tools and implementing things that we've learned in the classroom. Even if it was just on a few field trip days, like that really opened up my mind to more positivity and inspired me to want to partake more in environmental science. And then a negative, just to not counter that, but in support of what I said earlier, I had another teacher who was, I arrived to class late a few times. It was a bigger class. This guy was like an overachiever as far as professors went at the university. He was publishing like a ridiculous amount of papers every year. It's like a younger stud, maybe in his 40s. Just got his tenure or something. Like he was just like a go-getter. And by like halfway through the semester, turned in some assignments late, came in class late a couple of times. It was a bigger class. It was a very challenging class as well, very coding heavy. And but he was not supportive one-on-one. He was very much like, he'd call me out in the middle of class, like make a scene. And I know that he wanted the best for me. And I think at the end, I behaved, more adequately for what he expected of his students. But at the end of the day, like I literally had a class right before. Sometimes I was just like, I want to have lunch right now. Sometimes it was just like, it was college, sometimes you're just, anyways, that class, I think, was probably another class that, although he didn't directly inspire me, the material was amazing. And he exposed us to using code to do simulations for really cool data analysis. He let us design our own projects for animal behavior. That was the topic of the class. It was called animal behavior, but he let us design our own experiments. Mine was with crickets. And he let us like try to prove an evolutionary aspect of like how how these animals are behaving now, like based on observed behaviors, and then putting data through a design that you make through code to simulate, make a huge data set, and then just like statistically support your hypotheses. That could be its own whole podcast. It was like a 13-page final for the class. It was a lot of fun doing that. But yeah, in a lot of ways, he inspired me a lot with who he was. Definitely not how he called me out and talked to me very disrespectfully in front of everyone else instead of we could just talk about after class or something. But
did you do that to everybody?
He did that to one other kid, and that other kid never came back to the class.
Right.
The other kid dropped the class and just like gave up right there. I like kind of like took it wasn't abuse, but it was like uncalled for.
All right. Well, he had a thing. He had a bias.
Yeah, he did it a few times. And then at one point I was like, I'm not even gonna like ask him a question ever again. I'll just figure it out. But
you talked about being taught doomsday. Was that in high school?
Definitely.
Can you, because that's something that circulates in our world constantly. I mean, for us, for the rest of us that donate that much, we're all waiting for doomsday because that's what's coming out of the media, out of like climate change, out of like policies and so on. Can you talk a little bit about that, please?
Sure.
And the reality of that, if it's real.
Sure. I mean, the reality is the reality we're living in. I mean, almost everything to do with climate change. I mean, it's climate change is very real. Rising temperatures are very real. Rising sea levels are very real. But all these things, right? And most of these things are all like, well, let's say like 10 years from now, this city's underwater. 10 years from now, this amount of degrees Celsius will cause the species to go extinct. Or like 40 years from now, half the coastal U.S. will be underwater. Like all those things are real, but there's also billions of dollars of infrastructure planned for more parks and waterways in coastal areas like Miami, for example, to help deal with severe storms or rising water. And there's also new emerging technologies to, I think the fallacy, the biggest issue with this whole doomsday science is really that when science, I was but a little boy when it was coming out in the early 2000s, and probably more in the 90s. I was born in 98. Is that people were realizing like, oh, shit, the Industrial Revolution put out more CO2 than all the CO2 humanity put out in the last 5,000 years. So in the last 100 years, we've done more to pollute our Earth and take out more resources than in the last 5,000 years. That's a huge problem. So like us just realizing that, just realizing it out of nowhere once we realized it, as oceanographic studies were getting better and atmospheric studies are getting better, technology is getting better, modeling is getting better, and we can start putting things through these statistical algorithms and now virtual models and use these crazy processing power like supercomputers to like visualize it. We're like, oh shit, there is a huge chance of huge issues and like cities going underwater, all that I touched upon. And I think the realization was like, oh, the only way to, like, we need to share this info net. Like, that's probably what the scientists at the time, like, they stumbled upon all this discovery that, like, doomsday is very possible. And they put it out like that in the hopes to get more funding. Right? And that's how science works. Like, you get attention, you get funding generally. But instead, it became a huge political thing. People, does not have become a political conversation at all, but it's like, red or blue. Yeah, it's like people denying climate change and people supporting it and people signing things that say they support it but not really doing anything and everything in between. We just had the most, green Olympic Games, in the history of Olympic Games. But what did that save? Like half the amount of carbon or something like that. It's not like, if we're really trying to make a change here, we have to think of like orders of magnitude. Like it would be nice to be like 1/10. Like I don't think it's worth sacrificing people's freedoms and cutting out food that people normally eat to just make it half and make like a big political statement out of it. Personally, I think what's much more important is to just be cautious of your lifestyle and this ultra consumer society. There's little things here and there that if everyone did help, like we order some on Amazon, we want it the next day, but we're ordering 5 things. We can click that Amazon day delivery where they bundle it all in one day for fewer bucks, or some companies that try and use less packaging or recycling, but recycling programs are messed up. I think when it comes to environmental side, when it comes to trying to control how people live, it's just, that's not my wheelhouse. I'm a scientist. And I don't think telling people what to do is productive. I also don't think, leaving your shower running for 20 minutes before you get in for it to warm up makes sense. Maybe 30 seconds or a minute, or, if you really need to warm it up. But like, I've had roommates that don't really care at all.
Right.
And that is like, bro, like you should just care a little bit, and just caring a little bit will make a big difference if everyone just cared a little bit. It's not about never using a straw again or something. It's just about caring a little bit. And if you care a little bit, then policy eventually will go into place. Will it be too late? I'm not one to say, but honestly, I think technology and AI integration into environmental sciences is definitely going to help us postpone and prolong these issues that we're going to have to face with climate change. So there's hope, period. Plenty. No guarantees.
No guarantees. I mean, you're inherently an optimistic fella. Anyways, you have always inspired me with your optimism and your goodness, and it's true. This is the most true fact. And as you speak, I just can't help, like, okay, Amazon, you know? You get a box this big with something this big inside, you know?
And a lot of plastic.
A lot of plastic. I go to buy something organic at the supermarket, it's wrapped in 3 different plastic things. So I feel like there's so much fakeness in it.
There is.
And things that are green are not green. And there's a lot of that propaganda going on, and people don't really understand the real issue. And you brought something very important up, right? Because it could be like the shower, or it could be I'm going to the market, so I'm bringing my own bags, or it could be as that simple. At the same time, you have, I don't know, I get notes like, don't run the AC like a couple of hours. Meanwhile, you walk down the street in New York City, and some of them are blasting ACs with these open stores. It's just like there's so much non-reality to it and non-organization to it that I find it very difficult to digest as what it is. I mean, I 100% agree that we should all do our little part. Because we are of the earth.
Yeah, we are. And I think I feel really blessed growing up in New York City, one, with all the opportunities, but two, also with all the green spaces. You know, we're less than a 10-minute walk away from Hudson River, less than a 10-minute walk from Union Square Park, less than 10-minute walk from Madison Square Park. I mean, none of these are forests by any means, but it's nice to see a body of water. It's nice to see a bunch of trees, birds, and animals, and fungi spreading up after rain, or flowers blooming in spring. Like, it is beautiful. New York's a very beautiful city. I love living in Miami now for that reason. It's such an integrated city. The Biscayne Bay is right in it all. It's like the heart of the city. And I've seen beautiful cities in Europe that are even more well integrated with their surrounding ecosystem. And that's a whole area of environmental sciences, urban ecosystems. How well can you utilize the resources and beauty of nature to make the city a better and nicer place to live, period. I think that's really important for urban planning moving forward. I think that's really important. Like, I understand that our priorities as a society are more geared towards technological advances and comfort and convenience. But I mean, I know that if urban planners and politicians or developers or whoever's really holding that ball, that if we were to integrate, future development with the surrounding landscape and ecosystem a little more, instead of cutting down more trees and covering up waterways with concrete, then, I mean, these are resources that'll pay off billions and billions of dollars in the future. Right now, it isn't seen that way, but I mean, the ocean is probably the biggest economy in the world compared to any individual nation or country, just in the amount of resources it has, whether it's fish, whether it's oil, gas,
right,
whether it's space.
Right. And it's very mysterious, isn't it? I mean, we really don't know what's going on in the deep ocean, do we? Do you guys know?
No, but and that's cool. That's cool. I mean,
it's amazing.
Yeah, we know more about our solar system than our seafloor, and that's facts. There's more images. There's more documentation. We have more satellites out there than we do deep sea floor robot. Like, which is mind-boggling. That's a mind-boggling fact to me. But the other thing is like we don't really have any business being down there. We call it inner space in the same way we call outer space like away from the planet.
Oh.
Inner space is like the depths of our oceans. Because one, I mean, it's an extremely harsh climate. It's really cold down there. It's super high pressures. Like we have no business being there. But as far as coastal oceans go, I mean, the amount of utility that they offer us and expanding our cities or integrating, wave power, like there's just so much possibility for you really recognizing the blue economy, tie it into our country's economy, and not just seeing the ocean as fisheries. And fisheries happens to be like one of the 6 biggest industries in the world.
Wow.
Right up there, similar numbers with the oil industry. People just think,
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
If you think also like, why are small countries like Spain and Portugal and France and UK, how are they even like, I mean, of course they've been around, they're like, old superpowers, but how are they still relevant in today? I mean, huge parts of their economy come from their fisheries, their claims that they have over the North Atlantic on that side. And like, thinking about mackerel or sardines or whatever, these fish, when you're selling them in bulk, bringing in these countries billions and billions of dollars a year. Not to go into the US, we have 2 coasts. We have east and west. I mean, fisheries is a huge part of our economy. People tend to focus on the oil and this and that because that's where, more tax goes and there's more like conflict associated with that in international affairs. But fishing is huge as far as numbers go. And that's the main driver for funding in marine sciences, actually, is a lot of this research has to do with, acidification or pollution or this or that. But at the end of the day, it's also better informing government and these lobbyists and these corporations into how these fishery stocks are going to be affected and what to predict for their billions of dollars of income next year for sending fish off, how it works.
Pretty amazing stuff. And I can't help as you speak to think about, I mean, even water, right? Because drinking water is scarce in some places, right?
Yeah.
And there is the technology now where salt water can be converted. Am I correct?
Yeah. Desalinization is extremely common in islands and deserts and those kinds of climates. It's like the only way they're going to get it. In New York, we're lucky we have a huge reservoir upstate and around aquifers, all kinds of water. But drinking water is an extremely valuable resource.
This will not.
And in the future, it's projected to be more valuable than gas or blood or printer ink or, any valuable liquid. Water is extremely valuable. Although right now it's not necessarily viewed as such by society.
Well, it depends where you live.
Exactly.
Depends where you live.
Yeah, in a first world country, though, when you can drink out of any tap.
Absolutely.
And especially in New York City, I'm pretty sure it's been a law since I was a kid that, like, if you walk in any establishment, ask for a cup of water, they're supposed to give it to you.
Right.
I think, for example, though, in, like, Miami, it was a super hot place. That's not a thing. Like, most places say they don't even have to like, they can't give you tap water.
Oh, is that it?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Kind of crazy.
Interesting.
I've been on a bike ride, and I just, like, stopped at a cafe, like, hey, can I please have a cup of water? They're like, you gotta buy something.
I see.
Buy something tomorrow.
Like economics, right? Economics, making the money. Yeah, well, that's just North America. Places in South America, Africa, India.
Yeah.
Water scarce. Middle East.
Yeah. Only I think it's the numbers are about 3% of the water on surface of our planet is fresh water.
Really?
We're all about drinking water. Yeah. Drinking water. And more than 2/3 of that is frozen in glaciers or ice. So we're looking at like less than 1% of the water on the surface being drinking water. So it's
amazing.
Scarce. But I mean, with our technology, that's not necessarily something to worry about. As long as you have electricity, you can desalinate water.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
You buy expensive filters, you buy expensive machines, and you can do it hundreds and hundreds of times without worry.
Right.
But some people don't have access to that.
It is scary. It is scary because we can't survive without water wherever you are, including animals, anything that's alive and into water.
A lot of my inspirations are characters that are capitalizing on capitalism to put out positive messages and inspire people. You know, I think I look up to a lot of educators as inspirations, whether it was my teacher in, you know, applied conservation biology, or whether it's you or my father. You know, it's like, you know, people are showing me the ropes. Other professors I look up to, an advisor I had in college I still keep in touch with, who still checks in on me. One of my biggest inspirations these days also is one of my mentors and supervisors at work and in the lab. I think that a general theme across my inspirations and role models isn't necessarily the work they do, but the way they do it and the vigor that they do it with, and the ultimate goal that they have. I really tend to gravitate towards people who are ambitious, who have bigger dreams, who aren't so caught up with the mundane and the stresses, and they don't limit themselves based on those things. They think beyond numbers and beyond time, and they're just trying to do the best they can with what they have. That's as far as inspirations go. And aspirations, I think, are similar, whether it's dreams, you know, more far-fetched things, or whether it's to work in an awesome lab. You know, that was an aspiration. Have my research mean something, right? To do work that directly impacts policy, or work that directly impacts a group of people. And like, I don't want to ruin anyone's day, and I don't want to give people false hope. I just want to shed light on information that's interesting, that causes discussion, that leads to progress. Try to move away from that negative messaging of doomsday science, and teaching the younger generation that there isn't much hope, or most kids don't go outside anymore. Everyone's on video games, and like my generation played a lot of video games, but there's also a lot of advertisements and messaging to be outside and play with your friends, and like that was normal. There was a snow day, we'd go out and play in the snow. Last time there was a snow day in New York, I was here and I didn't see anyone outside, not even kids. Like, I don't know, that's just weird to me. It's not just video games, it's not just lack of advertise or whatever. I was thinking of like the Play 60 commercials, where like it would be like, go out and play 60 minutes a day or whatever. I don't even know if they still have. But the point is, I think like between social media, between video gaming and like online and like streaming, and those are careers, and that's an industry that's huge industry, booming industry, and just came out in the last 10, 20 years. And kids want to be streamers and content creators and video gamers and all that. If you do it, it's really cool. But if you don't make it in those fields, then you become a 20, 30-year-old playing video games. I have some friends like that, and it's fine, I think, but it's kind of sad too, especially when we live in a world with so many problems beyond environmental science, and not just problems, but when I think of problems, I'm trying to think of solutions. It's like putting our brains to work. It's putting our education to use. It's putting our connections into play. It's about the game of life and figuring it all out. And that's a lot more fun and real than anything virtual. Not trying to dumb down or say any of that's not important. It's very important. But this generation has lost a little bit of touch with the natural world. I don't like to see that.
I really agree with you, and I think you were the last generation that actually went there, and I'm so grateful that you did not grow up with on social media attached to it, with getting your identity from it, from likes, that you were engaged in nature for your love for nature, your ability to be playful.
Yeah. I think I was kind of the last generation in that sense, but we were also the first generation to grow up with it in a way.
Yes, you were. And you did play. I mean, it's not like you did it.
No, we were almost like the guinea pigs for social media. I mean, I remember when Facebook came out, I was in middle school, when it was made public. I remember Snapchat came out, I was in high school, and Instagram, and, you know, all these things. It's like, the thing was, at the time, there wasn't that much pressure. There weren't all these content creators. There weren't careers out of it. It was literally just for fun. It was something new. It was a very different culture at the time, but it was definitely part of my life. And especially in high school, I mean, people cared a lot. There was social anxiety surrounding likes and this and that. And by no means did it raise me, but it, you know, the culture of social media grew almost alongside my generation growing.
Yes.
And it appeared and developed with us. Like, we were the ones who were like complaining this isn't working, and they would update it. Or like this feature is dumb, and they'd update it. But at the same time, like, it wasn't taken so seriously. It was almost like, I'm like thinking to ones that failed, like MySpace or this or that, like dumb that they appeared for a year or two and then just fell out. And then some became integral to society, to keeping in touch with family across the world, or sharing travels, or telling stories, or building community. And that's what social media became, and it's kind of stayed. But there's also now this whole aspect of people just doing things for the likes, or doing things for the money, or doing things to sponsor things for the money, for the connection. It's just like it's become too much of a rabbit hole and too much mental effort. And like I said, I just think that distracts from the real problems and the real solutions in the world, and the real life and interactions, social interactions. That's extremely important.
Yes, for our well-being, right?
For our mental health.
For our mental health.
For our mental development. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For our contentment, for our happiness, for our ability to connect and have relationships that are meaningful.
Motivation to get out of bed every day.
Oh, a big one, right? Yeah. Passion about something.
Walk outside. I mean, it's I think, even like the COVID years just now proved that we live in this age that's so tied in with virtual, virtual reality, or between social media, Amazon and DoorDash and all this stuff. Like, you don't actually have to leave your house to be a member of society. You can work from home. You can live from home. You literally don't need to leave your house. But I see that as like kind of dystopian. I think that, no one has to leave their house every day. That's not what I'm saying. But if you can fully live without ever leaving your house, and then being like a young adult who literally never leaves your house for like a year, and I'm not, it has nothing to do with the COVID times. Sure, during the COVID times, things were done for reasons. But I know of people who are still kind of living like that, and it's just like, bro, there's a whole world out there.
I know people that live like that.
Yeah.
They still haven't left their house. And they use COVID as an excuse, but I'm super convinced it's just some excuse. They just find comfort and safety in their four walls.
I do too. There's times where I don't want to leave, or there's times where I want to stay home for a day or two. I have gone months on end of just being comfortable and not being super motivated to go out, not being super motivated to be social and stuff. I've been through that to some extent, but I don't think it's productive for myself, for my relationships, or for my relationship with society as a citizen of this country, as a citizen of the world. For collaboration, it's just not the way.
Right.
The way is to get out there. Carpe diem.
You're a very social person. If anything, you're the most social person I've ever met.
Nah.
Yes. In this house in particular, there have been...
Okay, I'm social, but
many, many kids that actually grew up here. And you are so social and educated, education orientated. That's been since you were really young, because you're the inspiration of Make Kids Transform. Like, that would have never happened without you. And that was for connection or whatever it was. I never asked you, like, what kind of made you... I was already involved in bringing art to your classes.
Yeah, you were always involved from elementary school.
No, from pre-K. We were doing ceramics when you were 3, right?
I remember that.
Right. So, and then elementary, and then middle school, but then first year in high school, you asked me to get involved with mindfulness, right? Why was that? Because I never asked you this, so this is interesting.
Yeah, I don't think the answer to a question that direct is that easy. I think it's a little more of a story, but to put it brief, as I was growing up, you were always curious and present with schooling and not so much that I feel like Yeah, you were extremely present, but I think you were very much interested in, my relationships with my teachers, with my friends, how to help foster creativity and positivity. Dad had more of like the get good grades kind of, and he was also like, my coach with like athletics stuff. Like it was like that was more his role, and your role was very like nurturing. I think that that led to me just being very like aware of my relationships with friends and their relationships with each other, and being like in high school, like kids are, I was a kid too. I mean, just mean like with your peers and your friends, like you're very honest. You're telling stories about, what's going on at home, or like, or whatever, or about your older brother in college, just hearing all this stuff and like hearing some of the things that kids are going through. Traveling from the Bronx to Chelsea, traveling from Staten Island to Chelsea, from Jersey, and it's like just getting different stories of different neighborhoods of, maybe places I've been, but I don't know what it's like living there. And it's like, it gave me a lot of perspective growing up in New York City. And then with your, nurturing and positive, curation, and support of my schooling, and always being there on parent teacher day and stuff, and getting to know the other parents and stuff, I think like those relationships became very important to me. And then especially through high school, we have teachers on our ass about silly things, about turning in a homework assignment late when kids are going through really serious things at home, or just in their own minds. And mental health is a huge issue, but like when we were in high school, it didn't have as much attention as it does now by any means. Even by the time I got to college, it was just like societally, it was a lot more attention to mental health awareness, period. And in high school, there was a lack of that. And I saw that as I was transitioning into high school from middle school. Speech from some of my closest friends, and you knew them, and being here in the house, and like, seeing the way that affected me, and then seeing that the way that affected our friend group at times, or like how drama was associated. And it was just like these like loops that at times felt like that's just how things were, which is sad. And I think like with your support, with your interest and your presence, and my upbringing and my schooling experience, you kind of fostered that idea of mindfulness to even come out, through you being a good mother. I think that there's a necessity for someone to give attention to my friends and I, like mental health, and even just like someone, at the time, even you like looking, when you came in to teach like a mindfulness course, I mean, you have testimonials from a lot of my friends, like just someone like an adult to look in your eyes and say like, what's wrong? Like, is everything okay? Like a lot of people didn't have that.
Most people don't have that.
Yeah. And growing up in New York City, it's like, you're almost like, most of the time it's awesome, but then sometimes you're just like in a crowd, you feel like an ant. It's like you're in the middle of Manhattan and like 100 tourists are walking by you, no one sees you, no one says hi, and then another New Yorker, like, you bump them in the shoulder and curse you out or something. It's just like, it feels like you feel so insignificant, and like no one cares, like no one would notice. Like it just, there's so much room for depression as a teenager in New York City, especially if you're the lonely kid, or especially if you're the nerdy kid, or well, now nerds are awesome, but the point that like it wasn't even so, like in my high school, there wasn't even that much like bullying going on necessarily. It was just like people were just like hard on themselves, and there wasn't that much support there. And just a little bit of mindfulness goes a long way. Even in just like, some of my best friends tell me today that like you teaching them a basic breathing pattern, or even just to take a deep breath when they realize they're stressed out, like changes the game for them like 9 out of 10 times. So
yeah, for all of us.
I think I realized, through what you shared with me as I was growing up, how useful it was for myself, and then seeing like, oh, well, even the basics could help so my best friend so much and help our relationship and our productivity and our creativity so much. That was where M.A.Y Kids came from. It was just that fitting that piece of the puzzle in, build that bridge, foster that community, that people don't have to feel like they're so alone. It's the most interconnected city in America, maybe in the world. Like New York has so much opportunity, so much potential, and
everybody.
Yeah.
And as everybody, it's a point of the world because it's so international. It's wonderful. I mean, that's what I love about it. I mean, in regards to M.A.Y Kids, I remember being like, what do you think of this idea, bouncing ideas on you? And you were like, oh, that's not going to fly, or that's good, or this is what is needed. And I always remember every semester, I was like, oh, I'm not doing this anymore. You were like, what do you mean? Like, come on. And you always kept me accountable. To also be kind, to also be compassionate, always to see the good side of it all. And you still do. That's your nature. And I'm so grateful for it because it has been really my North Star in my life in so many ways. Thank you for that, Francis, because I never asked you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Because without you, none of that would exist. I would have never got into youth work. And I'm so passionate about it. And actually is one of the biggest purpose in my life.
Yeah.
Because it's so rewarding.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you see education and going, what it's needed? And that could be with M.A.Y, without M.A.Y, like whatever you want to add to that.
I think that, these basic mindfulness tools, whether it's taking a deep breath or, not forcing yourself to stay up till or pulling all-nighter for like homework assignment. I just out of anxiety. Like fostering community is number one, I think. A safe space between teachers and students. I think that giving teachers the mindfulness tools is just as important as the students.
If anything, more important.
Yeah.
Because they could give it to their students.
There you go. It's a good way of looking at it.
That's the only way to look at that.
Yeah. I mean, if teachers are more mindful, then their teaching will be more mindful and there'll be less of a stress to students. I think that the bottom line, I think it would change, most of students' experiences off the bat is just if there's a clear line of communication and some sense of human understanding, I think it's also really easy for kids to take advantage of that.
Yes.
When teachers are too open or too hey, if things are bad at home, just let me know, you have to turn it on time. And then some kids who literally don't have a single problem in the world, they're just turning everything in late. And I mean, maybe I've done a little bit of that. No, but I think the point is that empowering people with basics of mindfulness or basics of physiology or basics of how your brain is structured and how you learn, even just basic knowledge changes the game for teachers and students alike. And just if there's at least an essence of safe communication, then I mean, introducing this, making this present in the public school system, I think will make everyone more productive. I don't necessarily think there has to be some crazy overhaul or some crazy changing of everything. I think that although sometimes I feel we're not really I mean, at the same time, growing up, it doesn't have to be college. It can be more about the social, kind of how it felt for me. It could be more about exploring life and sports and school and, and friends and romantic and relationships with teachers, like, being inspired by them or turned off by them or whatever, like, to subjects. But I think that, like, yeah, there's no need for these like extremes and like lack of communication and letting a single bad experience be like, I'm bad at math, and then never trying to do math again, which I've seen time and time again.
Absolutely. I'm bad at art, I'm bad at science, I'm bad at writing, I'm bad at this, because somebody said it.
Yeah, once. And then they're like traumatized for life. And like, I'm like hanging out with my friends in their 20s, or some even in their early 30s, and they're just like, I'm like doodling. They're like, what are you doing? And it's like, oh no, I don't draw. I'm bad at it. It's like, bro, I didn't ask if you were good or bad. I just asked if you wanted to put a pen or pencil to a piece of paper. It's not that serious. Some things in life are too important to be taken seriously. It doesn't have to. It's just expression. It's just, I think that's the most important thing, is to be comfortable with expressing yourself. And by that, I don't mean to be disrespectful or if a teacher says you're bad, not to like curse them out, but to be like, hey, I don't think that's right. Like, you shouldn't say I'm bad. Or, I mean, also little kids, it's not their place to say that. That's why giving teachers the tools for mindfulness, they won't say those things to kids and have that effect on them.
Yeah. I agree.
Yeah, I think the M.A.Y. kids curriculum is vital to making the education system better. I think that just those basic tools for educators and kids change the game. I think that there's a lot of talk or focus on like actually changing the content of, the public school system or like curriculum, but I don't think like a whole overhaul is necessary. I just think a little bit more mindfulness of your community, your country, your world, like just an idea, just an introduction to that, small to big picture, is important. So kids don't get overwhelmed when, COVID happens, or kids don't get overwhelmed when an environmental disaster happens, Katrina or whatever, I remember going through some of those things, and some kids are like, oh my, like got terrified that something's going to happen here next. Or, when we were in college and COVID, I was like, end of the world. And it's just like, just realizing that there's big scale things that are always going on. There's medium scale things that are always going on. There's things in your household or your friends that are always going on. And like a little bit of mindfulness in each of those realms and that hierarchy goes a long way. And just being understanding and not like losing your cool and not freaking out and not sacrificing who you are or your productivity out of anxiety or worry or depression. And I think that in a way that the M.A.Y. Kids curriculum is a remedy to that. It's a preventative measure. It's an empowerment to avoid that, because there will always be uncertainty and there will always be things that come up, but being able to like handle them more calmly is essential. Like we said, from anything from being like told that you're bad at drawing to being told that there's a global crisis. Like, you have to be able to like handle that on some level. I mean, not be content. I don't mean it like that, but I just take a deep breath and realize that there's hope, or like that you can still do something, or that you can still that what you think matters.
Oh.
Yeah.
We're all contributing to the consciousness, right, with our thoughts.
Sure.
Yeah. And the world needs a lot more love.
I mean, we're definitely contributing to the people, we talk to.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, I mean, positive mental attitude from the workplace to home. I like to think of that. I mean, that's like a corny little acronym, AMA, positive mental attitude, but that's real. I mean,
I think that's a great one.
Yeah, I'm hearing other kinds of things for mindfulness these days, like applied philosophy. Like, I'm being introduced to some basics of philosophy that
absolutely
help you handle things as they come.
Absolutely. I mean, Plato was talking about this thousands of years ago.
Yeah, I mean,
we're not reinventing the wheel.
Yeah.
Know thyself.
Yeah, and I think that, if for some reason like Western society or some areas or states in America or whatever have an issue with the word mindfulness or issue with the word meditation or whatever it is, then like it doesn't have to be taught like that. It could be taught like applied philosophy or fucking human skills or global
mindset
skills. Yeah, positive mindset.
Mindset. Just learning your own mindset. Like, oh, I'm being negative right now. It's very important. I mean, I have moments of that, and I'm into mindfulness my whole life. It's like, and recognizing that and being able to pull oneself out of that.
Yeah, and I think mindset is probably the most important word of this conversation, because it just goes to show that mindfulness isn't content. It's not like math or science, or it's truly a perspective. It's truly a mindset, and it doesn't. The labels don't matter. There's not necessarily like specific, and math is like a square is a rectangle, rectangle is not a square. Like mindfulness isn't so much like that. You call it whatever you want. It doesn't need labels, but that might just introduce that mindset to people. The proactive, positive mindset of understanding and community and connection. I mean, that's it.
Yeah, self-awareness, right? Understanding what's happening inside.
That's the most important.
Yeah.
I think that's like
hearing what's happening inside, being able to recognize.
Yeah. Yeah, and I mean, that becomes easier when communication feels safe.
Absolutely. And somebody has to verbalize it, because this is just inherent stuff. Like, we all know this stuff. And when we hear it, it's like, oh, I'm not the only one that thought that? Oh, I'm allowed to do that?
Yeah, I mean, that's like the basis of like AA and like...
Absolutely. It's the basis of anything.
Yeah, it's just, I mean, that's just community, all right? That's just fostering a safe space where you feel like you're not the only one.
Absolutely.
It's a safe space. That's community.
But so now we're talking about something very interesting, right? Because we all feel like we're isolated individuals, and the Western world is really gun-ho, including myself, on individuality, and I love that. But the reality is we're all connected.
Yeah.
And we all influence each other and inspire each other one way or another, if we know it or not.
We do. You inspire me every day.
You inspire me, my friend. My son. My son's son.
Thank you.
I'm beyond proud of you for all you do. Thank you so much for being my North Star in my life, because it's true. For everything. I mean, we've had some of the best conversations about art. I mean, it's been so many elements. This is just a tiny, tiny bit. Thank you so much for this conversation.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah?
Yeah?
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.